Welcome to a unique place where sci-fi and humanity blends into a single, expansive universe. Here, every story I share is set in the same universe but told from different perspectives across time and space. Dive into our channel and explore this universe through the eyes of its heroes and villains. The Mecron fleet hung in the void like a swarm of silver wasps, their sleek chrome ships glinting menacingly in the harsh sunlight as they encircled Earth. Below, cities were illuminated not by the gentle dusk, but by the violent explosions that ripped through historic streets and modern skyscrapers alike. The air vibrated with the sound of alarms and the roar of engines, punctuated by the distant, relentless drum of Mecron bombardments. Aboard the Neotech Indomitable, the bridge was a cavern of shadow and light, screens flickering with the grim updates from the surface. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez stood by the panoramic window, her eyes tracing the arcs of fire that descended upon her home planet. Her jaw was set, her hands clenched at her sides, not out of fear, but a resolute determination that hardened with each explosion that scarred the Earth. Captain James Eldridge surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on each of his officers in turn. "We're not going to let them have their way," he declared, his voice cutting through the tense murmur of his crew. "Not while we have fight left in us." Rodriguez turned from the window, her expression steely. "We'll give them a fight they won't forget, sir," she responded, the resolve in her voice echoing Eldridge's sentiment. At the strategy table, Dr. Lisa Huang was hastily setting up a simulation of the Mecron fleet's possible next moves, her fingers flying over the holographic controls. "Their pattern is almost algorithmic. If we can anticipate their next sequence, we might find an opening," she explained without looking up, fully absorbed in her task. Chief Engineer Tomasz Nowak, who had been quietly recalibrating a device that looked more like a relic from an ancient space arsenal, chimed in without diverting his attention. "And if brains don't work, I've got a few old-school tricks that just might do the trick," he said, a hint of a grin playing at the corner of his mouth despite the dire circumstances. Eldridge nodded, appreciative of the levity. "Brains and brawn, people. That's how we'll beat them." He turned his attention back to the main display, where the orbiting Mecron units continued their relentless assault. "Rodriguez, I want you on the primary assault. You're boarding one of their command ships. It's risky, but we need someone with your nerve and cyborg power to pull this off." "Yes, sir," Rodriguez replied instantly, her voice void of hesitation. Her mind was already racing through the scenarios, the pathways of attack and retreat, the layout of enemy ships she had memorized. Eldridge's eyes met hers, an unspoken understanding passing between them. This was not just another mission, it was a chance to tilt the balance, to make a statement that humanity would not yield so easily. As the crew of the Indomitable prepared for what could be their final gambit, the Earth continued to bear the brunt of the Mecron onslaught. Yet, amidst the chaos and the carnage, a pulse of unyielding human spirit began to resonate, a signal that despite the darkness, the light of human resilience burned fiercely still. Rodriguez looked once more at the beleaguered planet below, her resolve solidifying into something unbreakable. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were far from outmatched. She turned away from the view, her steps firm and sure as she headed to prepare for the mission. Earth needed a hero, and she was ready to be just that. In the dimly lit confines of the briefing room aboard the Indomitable, Maya stood with her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the object at the center of the room. It was sleek, ominous, a tube large enough to hold a person, fitted with various technological appendages that made it look like a creature from a deep-sea nightmare. This was the boarding torpedo, the latest brainchild of Chief Engineer Nowak. "Now, this is not your standard fare for boarding enemy ships," Nowak began, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and caution as he gestured towards the torpedo. "It's stealthier, faster, and packs a bigger punch, designed to penetrate the Mecron's outer defenses like a hot knife through butter." Maya circled the torpedo, her eyes assessing its structure and the placement of its thrusters and stealth panels. "How fast are we talking?" she asked, her tone indicating both curiosity and the weight of the responsibility she was about to take on. "Fast enough to make your last roller coaster ride seem like a lazy river float," Nowak replied with a smirk. "Once you're in, it's all manual. You'll need to navigate through their defenses using minimal guidance systems. We can't risk electronic emissions. They'd pick up on it," Huang interjected, her eyes flicking between her datapad and Maya. I've uploaded the schematics of their command ship into the torpedo's database. Maya nodded, absorbing every piece of information. What about when I get inside? What's the play? Eldridge stepped forward, his expression serious. Plant the charges around their antimatter reactor. You take out their power, and their command ship becomes a floating junkyard. It's a precision strike, needs to be swift and silent. I understand, Maya replied, the gravity of the mission settling in her voice. The room fell silent for a moment, the magnitude of the task dawning on everyone present. Maya broke the stillness, turning to Nowak. And if things go south? Well, Nowak began, scratching his head. I guess you improvise. There's an eject pod included. Not the most comfortable ride, but it'll get you back out in a pinch. Comfort's the least of my worries, Maya chuckled, her demeanor lightening the room's tense air. It's the getting out part that counts. The group moved closer around the torpedo, going over every detail, every possible scenario. They discussed entry points, navigation paths, and contingency plans. Through it all, Maya's confidence never wavered. If anything, her resolve only hardened. She was not just fighting for herself or the crew, but for Earth, for humanity. As the briefing drew to a close, Maya stayed back to go over the torpedo's controls once more. Eldridge watched her for a moment, then approached quietly. Rodriguez, you don't have to do this, he said gently. We could still find another way. Maybe… Maya cut him off, her gaze steady. No, Captain. We've run out of time for maybes. It's now or never, and I'm ready. I believe in this. She patted the side of the torpedo. And I believe in us. Eldridge nodded, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Then let's make sure it counts. We're all counting on you. With a final check of her gear, Maya proceeded to the launch bay. The walk through the corridors of the Indomitable was a solitary journey, each step echoing softly against the metal floors. Crew members she passed nodded their support, some offering a thumbs up, others a solemn salute. Reaching the launch bay, Maya looked over the boarding torpedo one last time. She traced her hand along its surface, the metal cold and unyielding under her touch, much like the resolve that filled her. She then climbed inside, her body fitting snugly into the custom seat, surrounded by controls and screens that would soon guide her on her most perilous journey. Outside the torpedo, Nowak and a team of technicians made final adjustments, their movements precise and methodical. Eldridge's voice crackled through the comms inside the cockpit, his tone a mixture of command and concern. Rodriguez, you're the spearhead of humanity's hope. Bring that ship down. Maya strapped herself in, her fingers dancing over the controls, setting them just as she had practiced countless times. Copy that, Captain. It's time to remind them why you don't mess with Earth. As the bay doors began to close, sealing her inside her metallic steed, Maya took a deep, simulated breath as a heavy cyborg she didn't need to breathe, the gravity of her task settling in her chest. But it was matched, beat for beat, by the thrumming pulse of human spirit, fierce and unquenchable. She was ready. The boarding torpedo lay like a dormant beast in the launch bay of the Indomitable, its sleek, dark form almost absorbing the harsh white light that flooded the space. Inside, Maya sat enveloped by the silence, her fingers poised over the controls, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline that pulsed through her veins. With a final confirmation from the control tower, the launch sequence initiated, a low hum vibrating through the hull of the torpedo as it came to life. The clamps released with a sharp clank, and Maya felt a momentary weightlessness as the torpedo was ejected into the cold, unforgiving expanse of space. Outside, the stars were blurred streaks against the black canvas of the universe, the Earth a swirling marble of blues and greens far below. Ahead, the Mecron perimeter loomed, a network of defense satellites and patrolling drones moving in precise, predictable patterns. Maya's hands moved with practiced ease, adjusting the thrusters just so, the torpedo slipping through the vastness like a shadow. The stealth technology Nowak had integrated into its design was doing its job perfectly. The usual radar pings and sensor sweeps slid off its surface without a trace. As she maneuvered closer to the Mecron defenses, Maya's training took over. She recalled every simulation, every piece of advice Huang had given her about the enemy's tactics. The Mecrons relied on algorithms, predictable to a fault, and she used that to her advantage, calculating each move to keep within their blind spots. Her focus was absolute, yet her mind couldn't help but drift momentarily to the crew she had left behind. She could almost hear Nowak's voice, half-jokingly reminding her to not scratch the paint off the fancy new toy. She allowed herself a brief smile. There was comfort in remembering their faces, their faith in her. The interior of the torpedo was cramped, the air cool and recycled, but Maya felt a surge of warmth, a reminder of what she was fighting for. Her hands nudging the controls, making minute adjustments as she edged ever closer to the heart of the Mecron fleet. The first major obstacle was a cluster of surveillance drones, orbiting a Mecron cruiser like mechanical vultures. Maya dipped lower, using a debris field for cover, the metallic remnants of a previous battle providing a macabre form of camouflage. She held her breath, counting the seconds as she glided silently past the drones, her presence undetected. Once clear, Maya allowed herself a moment of relief, her gaze locked on the distant silhouette of the Mecron command ship. It was larger than any ship she had ever seen, bristling with antennas and gun ports, a fortress among the stars. But not impregnable. Almost there, she whispered to herself, her voice a low murmur in the quiet of the torpedo. She plotted her final approach, her eyes scanning the readouts, making sure she remained unseen. The last few kilometers were the most harrowing. Each meter gained a silent victory of human cunning over robotic predictability. Maya's training, humanity's ingenuity, and a good dose of sheer nerve had brought her this far. Now, it was just a matter of delivering on the promise she had made. As the command ship grew larger in her view, dominating the viewport, Maya prepared for the final phase. She was no longer just a soldier on a mission. She was Earth's avenger, the spear tip of humanity's defiance. With a steady hand and a resolute heart, she guided the torpedo into the hull of the giant ship. The hull of the Mecron command ship gave way to the torpedo, breaching every single layer of armor it had until it came to a stop. It then pretended to be a dud, a torpedo that never exploded. As she eased out of the boarding torpedo, the silence was almost deafening, broken only by the soft hiss of her own systems and the muffled clinks of her tools. The corridors of the ship were a stark, unending gray, lined with conduits and pulsing lights, their rhythm steady and predictable. Maya moved with a ghost's grace, her steps silent, dampened by stealth systems, her presence just another shadow among the many that filled the vessel. She checked her wrist device, a compact map displaying her route and highlighting the reactor's location, a beacon in the maze of sameness. Each intersection posed a risk of exposure, and the first real challenge came swiftly. A patrol unit, its movements crisp and devoid of any hesitation, rounded a corner unexpectedly. Maya pressed herself against the wall, cloaked by the low light, her heart pounding in her ears. The patrol passed by without a flicker of awareness, its sensors not designed to pick up the subtleties of human stealth. With the path clear, Maya continued, her progress a testament to human adaptability. Where the Mecrons relied on pre-programmed routes and responses, she improvised, using every tool at her disposal. Navigating through the ship, Maya reached the first critical juncture where she needed to set charges. The site was an auxiliary control panel, crucial for the ship's internal communications. Setting the explosive was a delicate task, her hands steady as she attached the device, her mind alert for any sign of discovery. The charge set, she activated a timer, its countdown silent, its threat lethal. As she moved deeper into the bowels of the ship, the challenges grew. At one point, a door refused to open. Resourcefulness turned into necessity as brute force took over. Maya used her hydraulic muscles to pry it open, the metal doors groaning under the unnatural force. "It's not subtle, but it'll do," she muttered to herself, pushing through into a new section of the ship, closer to the reactor. Here, the energy was palpable, the air thrumming with the power that coursed through the ship's veins. She could almost feel the hum of the reactor calling to her, each step drawing her closer to her objective, and to danger. The corridors here were more heavily patrolled, and Maya had to blend more aggressive maneuvers with her stealth. Finally, the massive doors to the reactor chamber loomed ahead, daunting in their scale, but no match for her. Maya paused, taking a moment to assess her surroundings and plan her approach. The weight of her mission pressed down on her, but so did the determination to see it through. Maya stood before the reactor chamber, its doors imposing yet silently inviting, promising both the potential for victory and the peril of ultimate detection. She placed her palm against the cool metal, feeling the subtle vibrations of energy pulsing just beyond. This was the heart of the Mechron ship, and she was about to send a shockwave through its system. Drawing a compact device from her belt, Maya attached it to the door's keypad. The small screen on the device flickered as it interfaced with the Mechron technology. "Come on, work your magic," she murmured, watching as sequences of code scrolled rapidly across the display. Then the door clicked, a sound almost inaudible yet thunderous in its implications. She pushed against it, the metal yielding as she slipped through into the reactor room. The chamber was vast, dominated by the reactor core, a pulsing orb of energy suspended by magnetic fields. Its power was almost beautiful, ethereal in its glow, but Maya knew the destruction it could unleash. She didn't have long to admire the view. The room's security systems were more sophisticated than any she had encountered so far. Laser grids crisscrossed the access paths to the core, and sensor drones hovered, their movements sporadic and unpredictable. Maya pulled out another device, this one a small, spherical emitter. She placed it on the ground, tapping its surface twice. It began to pulse, emitting a series of data frequencies that mimicked Mechron infantry crossing the room. With the path cleared, she advanced, each step measured, each breath calculated. She reached the core, setting up her charges around its base. Her hands moved with a surgeon's precision, the stakes of her operation etched in every line of her focused expression. As she armed the last of the explosives, Maya allowed herself the briefest moment of quiet. "For Earth," she whispered, before stepping back into the shadows. With the explosives set, Maya retraced her steps, retrieving her emitter and navigating back through the laser grids. Her escape from the reactor chamber was as smooth as her entry, the door sliding shut with a silent, promising thud behind her. As Maya moved back through the corridors, the weight of what was coming next settled on her shoulders, a mix of dread and anticipation. She had set the stage for a monumental upset, a critical blow to the Mechron dominance. Now all she needed was to make her escape and watch the dominoes fall. As she slipped through the shadows, Maya couldn't help but feel a flicker of triumph. The heart of the machine was in her hands, and she was about to squeeze. Her path to extraction was a maze of quick decisions and quicker movements. At one junction, a door that should have been open was sealed shut. Without hesitation, Maya pulled a small, high-impact grenade from her belt, another of Nowak's gadgets, and placed it against the door. The explosion was muffled, with her body shielding the blast. When the smoke cleared, the way was open again, a testament to her readiness to use brute force when finesse failed. Through her earpiece, the static lessened momentarily, Eldridge's voice reaching her. "Rodriguez, you need to move faster. We're seeing activity that suggests they're onto you." "Copy that, Captain," Maya responded, her voice calm despite her quickening pace. "I'm on my way out." Maya's resolve never wavered. She remembered Eldridge's words about what they were fighting for, their humanity, their home, and let that fuel her strides. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Neotech Indomitable was alive with a frenetic energy as Captain Eldridge oversaw the preparations for the imminent diversionary assault. The tactical screens flickered with vectors and trajectories, mapping out a dance of ships and artillery that was about to unfold against the Mechron fleet. "Align the forward batteries. I want crossfire at sectors 5 and 7. Keep them guessing," Eldridge commanded, his voice a firm anchor amidst the storm of activity. His executive officer, Commander Chen, coordinated the fleet's movements, her commands crisp and decisive. "All ships, initiate feint alpha. Draw their ships out of formation." Outside, the space around the Mechron fleet became a canvas of chaos. The human ships, smaller and more agile, darted in and out of the robotic fleet's rigid formations. The Indomitable, a behemoth compared to its fleetmates, barrel-rolled through space, its cannons blazing. The maneuvers were reckless, almost foolhardy, but underpinned by a sharp strategic acumen that only seasoned human captains could execute. Eldridge watched the battle unfold, his eyes calculating. "Time the next volley for when they realign. Hit them just before they settle," he directed, anticipating the enemy's movements. His strategy exploited the Mechron's reliance on patterns, turning their predictability into a liability. On the main deck, the crew worked with a synchronized efficiency that belied the intensity of their situation. Tactical Officer Liu called out incoming fire, her voice steady. "Brace for impact on starboard quarter." The ship shuddered as it absorbed the hit, shields flickering under the strain of the Mechron positron cannons. "Shields at 72% and holding, Captain," reported Engineer Nowak from his station. "Keep those shields up, and reroute auxiliary power to the aft cannons. We're not done here," Eldridge responded, his gaze never leaving the tactical display. The Mechron fleet, unaccustomed to such dynamic opposition, faltered in their response. Their movements, usually so precise, became hesitant, their formations disrupted by the unpredictable volleys and feints of the human ships. Amid the tactical ballet, Eldridge found a moment to communicate with his fleet. "This is more than a fight for survival," he broadcasted, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "This is a testament to our ingenuity, our courage, and our will to endure. Let's show them what it means to stand against humanity." Cheering broke out across the bridge, the crew's morale buoyed by their captain's words. They were not just operators of a ship, they were part of a living, breathing entity that was fighting tooth and nail against an implacable foe. As the assault continued, the Indomitable and its sister ships wove through the Mechron lines, their guns never silent, their movements a series of calculated risks that paid off in holding the enemy's attention divided and disorganized. "Prepare for another run. Target their command ship," Eldridge ordered, pointing to a segment of the fleet that seemed to be coordinating the Mechron response. "If we shake them up there, it'll give Maya the opening she needs to get out." Commander Chen nodded, relaying the new set of commands. "All units, focus fire on grid mark Zeta 3. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." A chorus of cannons fired in unison, the beams of energy streaking across space to hammer at the Mechron command unit. The ship staggered under the barrage, its return fire delayed by the sudden onslaught. Within the confines of the Mechron command ship, Maya raced against the ticking countdown as she navigated through the increasingly chaotic corridors. The alarms were now a constant blare, the ship's internal systems thrown into disarray by the imminent threat of the reactor detonation she had orchestrated. The ship felt alive, aware of its impending doom, corridors flashing with red warning lights, mechanical voices issuing orders in a sterile, emotionless cadence. Maya knew her path to the boarding torpedo was compromised. Mechrons swarmed the area, their programming now fully alert to the human saboteur in their midst. She needed an alternative, and fast. She sprinted towards the fighter bays, her movements fueled by a mix of adrenaline and the stark drive to survive. As she reached the bay, the door before her slid open, revealing a row of sleek metallic fighters, their designs sleek and powerful. Before she could board the ship, a Mechron suddenly blocked her path, firing its arm-mounted weapon. She skillfully dodged the barrage of fire, quickly drawing her own pistol to shoot at the robotic figure. Despite her bullets making it all the way through, the Mechron didn't flinch and slammed both its arms down on her. Bracing herself, she caught the Mechron's arms. Although powerful, they were nothing compared to the razor-faced creatures she had previously fought. With a determined smile, she ripped the robot's arms from its body, then leapt up and delivered a fierce kick to its head, sending it flying. Landing smoothly, she muttered, "That's for Earth as well." Then she jumped into the nearest fighter, slamming the manual release handle down with a grunt. Inside the cramped space of the fighter, Maya strapped herself in as the console in front of her lit up, a series of foreign symbols blinking rapidly. She bypassed the standard launch sequence with a few quick modifications to the wiring panel beneath her seat, a trick Nowak had shown her during their preparations. The fighter shuddered violently, then shot out from the command ship with a force that pressed her into her seat, the G-forces tugging at her with ruthless intensity. Outside, the stars spun wildly as the fighter careened away from the Mechron ship. Maya tried to orient herself, her eyes flicking across the pod's rudimentary sensor display. She watched as the distance between her and the Mechron ship rapidly increased, her escape not a moment too soon. Behind her, the command ship was a swelling light of impending destruction. Then, with a brilliance that turned night into day, the reactor exploded. The shockwave hit her pod, tossing it like a leaf in the wind. Systems inside whined and blinked out, the power fluctuating dangerously. Maya fought to keep her focus, her training keeping her hands steady even as her body wanted to brace for impact. The explosion ripped through the Mechron fleet, the chain reaction visible even as her fighter spun. Ships that were too close were caught in the blast, their structures failing, breaking apart under the stress. The command ship itself became a blossoming fireball, its once formidable silhouette now fracturing into pieces that drifted apart in the silent ballet of destruction. Maya's fighter finally stabilized, the power kicking in to correct its course. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to absorb the success of her mission, despite the rough escape. Her gaze was drawn back to the devastation she had left behind. The Mechron fleet was in disarray, their coordination lost with the command ship's destruction. Relief washed over her, followed quickly by the steeling of her resolve. She wasn't out of danger yet. She needed to get back to the Indomitable, to her crew, and prepare for whatever came next. "Indomitable, this is Rodriguez," she broadcasted, her voice steady despite the earlier chaos. "Mission accomplished. I'm coming home." The response was static at first, then the crackle of a connection being made. "Rodriguez, this is Eldridge. We saw the fireworks. Good to hear you're still with us. We're picking up your signal. Hold tight. We're coming for you." As she waited for rescue, Maya watched the remnants of the Mechron fleet struggle to regroup, their movements sluggish, uncoordinated. She couldn't help but smile, a tired but triumphant grin spreading across her face. Humanity had struck a heavy blow today, thanks to their ingenuity, their bravery, and a little bit of improvised luck. She leaned back in her seat, watching the stars begin to steady in the sky as her fighter drifted. The abyss had tried to claim her, but she had escaped, her spirit as unyielded as ever. As the remnants of the Mechron fleet drifted aimlessly through space, a battered but unbroken Earth rallied its forces for a decisive counterattack. Aboard the Indomitable, the crew prepared for the engagement with a newfound vigor, the success of Maya's daring mission fueling their spirits. Captain Eldridge surveyed the tactical display, his eyes alight with the strategic possibilities now laid bare before them. "All units, this is our moment," he declared over the comm system, his voice resonant with the weight of impending victory. "Strike with all you have." In the midst of battle, Maya, newly rescued and standing once again on the bridge of the Indomitable, watched as their enemies faltered under the relentless human onslaught. The bridge crew around her worked with a synchronicity that spoke of hours of relentless training and shared hardship. Their actions not just military duty, but a personal vendetta against the invaders. Eldridge allowed himself a small smile, then turned to Maya. "Lieutenant, I think this victory speech is yours to give." Stepping up to the comm unit, Maya cleared her throat, her voice broadcasting to the crew and, through relayed feeds, to the entire world. "This is Lieutenant Rodriguez of the Indomitable. Today we stood together against a threat that sought to end our way of life. Today we fought not just for survival, but for our future, for Earth. And we won." Her voice, laden with emotion, resonated deeply with everyone who heard it. Around the world, people spilled into the streets, their faces alight with joy and relief. Fireworks filled the skies, a mimicry of the cosmic battle they had just witnessed, celebrating human resilience. Families embraced, strangers shared tears of joy, and leaders spoke of unity and the indomitable spirit of humanity. Back on Earth, Maya and the crew of the Indomitable returned as heroes. Parades filled the avenues of the major megacities, and the crew was decorated with honors. Maya, standing beside Eldridge and her fellow officers during a ceremony, felt the weight of their gaze, the admiration and gratitude of a planet they had saved. In quieter moments, away from the public's eye, the crew gathered on the deck of the Indomitable, looking out at the stars. "We did more than survive today," Maya reflected, her comrades nodding in agreement. "We proved that in the face of the abyss, we push back, we endure, we thrive, and we will do it again." The celebration of victory was more than a display of joy. It was a reaffirmation of unity and strength. As night fell, the lights of Earth shone brighter than they had in the past months of relentless battle against the Mechron, each one a testament to the battles fought and won, both in space and within themselves. But they also knew these destroyers of the universe would not give up so soon. They would be back, more fierce than ever. But that would be another Triverse story for a different time. If you've stuck with me up to this point, a heartfelt thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to remind you that my entire channel is dedicated to the Triverse and its enthralling Mechanoid saga. While many of the stories stand alone, allowing you to dive in at any point, crafting these narratives takes about 4 or 5 days each, so your patience is greatly appreciated. If you find yourself enjoying what you see, consider exploring more of my videos. Each one, in its own unique way, weaves together more of the overarching story I'm telling.